All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And hello all. So glad so many could make it. We're very excited today. A lot going on in today's show. We've got the Pulitzer Prize winner, David Cay Johnston, joining in the second hour. In fact, David and I have been doing back and forth about what to speak about because there's so much going on, and we won't limit our conversation to the campaign or to Trump. We'll even get into a little bit of what's happening in Ukraine in our conversation with David Cay Johnston. So looking forward to that. Kim is here,
Kim,
as you know. She's covering news events through the show, and Tony is here covering
Thanks, Tony.
all things technical and sort of landing the technical plane as it continues to rock. I've gotten a few emails, and again, our meetup is sold out for Thursday night. It's going to be, in the Western time zone, 6:30 to 8:30. Well, we got people joining from all over the country and from all over the world, so I'm really looking forward to that. And the links should go out today. So tomorrow I'll give you an update, and those people who don't get the links, or if one gets into the outfield, we will handle that tomorrow. But I also want to mention that from the Midas Touch Network, Anthony Davis joins us in just a couple of minutes. I want to talk to him about something that I feel is being forgotten or not spoken of in relation to a lot of the new hangers-on who've come on board the Trump train. I'll give you a couple of names. A high-profile name is RFK Jr. The second high-profile name would be Tulsi Gabbard. They do something and have been dining out on the kind of peacenik, he didn't get us into a war when he was president BS that is really just that. It is incorrect, and it is, you're going to say, what do you mean? He didn't get us into a war, Mark. What are you talking about? I'll share my thoughts on this and how a huge part of the Trump decision-making process on the military is really left out of that. But they are completely dining out on that. That they are suggesting, Gabbard plays it so effectively. She really is a great surrogate for Trump because she has respectable military service and she has a great ability to speak on the stump. So when you put those two things together, she sounds quite credible, but she is slinging BS. Anyway, we'll talk to Anthony about that in just a second. I have bowling with Biden as well. In fact, I may want to do that quickly before Anthony gets here. And then, of course, the big story of the morning, and it came in late yesterday, is the way the Democrats have blasted into Georgia with lawyers to counter the clear strategy, which is to hold back certification in key counties and even just some rural counties that one might not normally have on their radar, so as to blur the election results, not certify the election results ultimately, and in so doing, preventing the election from actually getting to a place where the vote matters. Instead, it'll be the courts that matter, and it'll be Congress that will elevate Donald Trump into the presidency. We talked about this strategy before. We'll mention it again with Anthony Davis. But what's happening now is that the Democrats are challenging this certification issue, and they're doing it first in the state of Georgia. And there is no state in America that disenfranchises voters more effectively and plays with the election results and the people's voice, essentially suppressing it, better than the state of Georgia. Gerrymandering is the way that comes to mind. They gerrymander the hell out of Georgia. And believe me, in the gerrymandering sweepstakes, there are many states that compete. But Georgia, it's a high art. Spencer Jaffe says Tulsi just wants attention. First of all, thank you for the $5 super chat. I think that there is some truth to the fact that Tulsi is brand building the way a lot of politicians in the new age are brand building. So you have it in RFK Jr., I believe. Sorry, RFK Jr. backers, but I think there's a lot of ego in the RFK Jr. Independent run for the presidency, and now in his move to attach himself to Donald Trump and now to actively show up on the stump. He's all of a sudden relevant again. But the idea somehow that Trump respects him in any way from a political policy perspective, it's absurd. I mean, everything Trump has said runs up against the best of RFK Jr. When I say the best of RFK Jr., I'm talking about his advocacy for the environment. But he has so many issues that run afoul of that he becomes, sadly, a troublesome candidate. I'll talk to Anthony Davis about him as well. There are thousands of voter suppression tactics planned on the 7 big states. The battleground states. I agree. There are I don't know if thousands, but there are sufficient numbers to concern us about this next election. The devil went down to Georgia, said Jim Shields, indeed. All right, let's get things started. Thank you for being here. Smash the like button, all that YouTube stuff. It helps us, and I appreciate it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This guy's a phenom on the Midas Touch Network. How about it? My favorite Britisher. Yes, you're right. I mean, I know a lot of British people. So when I say the favorite, I mean... Oh, he's not here yet?
No.
No, I can't hear you, but I assume that's a no.
Not.
That's an outrage. All right, stop this. Stop. He's not here.
I mean, there you are playing the national anthem for the UK.
Well, it's not the national anthem, but I agree that
what is
that's Hail Britannia. I think it's the naval march.
Oh.
But I like it more than the national anthem.
The official sounding
it
song.
It should be the national anthem. I agree with that. Yes, exactly.
What?
Yes, exactly. So I am, now I'm...
I only like people that like me.
All right.
Yeah,
well. Say good thing.
I've never seen anything like it.
Okay. So this will give me a chance to do bowling with Biden? I love that. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I love that he's a little bit behind because...
The Mark Thompson Show.
Let's do it. This is Bowling with Biden.
Live from White House Lanes, it's Bowling with Biden.
It's go time!
This man's going to win a lot of political offices.
Now, here's your Bowling with Biden host, Mark Thompson.
Why, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here for Bowling with Biden, and I will tell you that I know most of you are thinking, Biden? Why are we still talking about Biden? Biden's irrelevant. He's not running for president anymore. Well, Biden's done a lot during his administration. You may come to that notion grudgingly if you are an anti-Biden person, but I think his administration was quite successful in many ways. However, and that's what this story is about, and it comes out of the world of Politico. They did a nice job on this. The agendas on labor, climate change, corporate greed, the Supreme Court may completely gut all of the gains in these areas. And Kamala Harris may not matter, even if she were to win. This is the power of the Supreme Court. We've surrendered so much power to this corrupt court that they are able to influence policy in America in ways that they never were before. And it's the inability of Congress to do anything. And I've made this point, as you know, for years, that slowly the courts are the ways in which the policy and law is being laid down because legislation regarding the law and regarding public policy, legislation isn't getting passed. So they suggest that Supreme Court rulings this summer, which point to freezing a lot of the regulations that were imposed during the Biden administration, they will essentially undo or prevent from coming into effect a lot of the things that Biden had put into effect as policy. In Texas, a federal judge blocked Biden's ban on the non-compete agreements for workers. In Mississippi, a judge there stopped his discrimination protections in health care for transgender people. An Ohio-based appeals court temporarily put a stop to preventing internet companies from throttling service. You'll remember these are all things that have yeah, exactly. Biden appointees have spent years writing rules to crack down on credit card late fees, requiring airlines to fork over cash and refunds. Also making millions of people now eligible for overtime pay. Also reining in polluting industries. All of these things have happened through the years and under the Biden administration. But the future of these policies, along with whatever else Biden wants to get done on student debt relief and artificial intelligence, this kind of thing, they really are threatened by this Supreme Court and by the court system generally, which has been, I'd suggest to you, taken over in significant ways by, quote, conservative judges who really have on the agenda to undo a lot of this. They're wildly business and corporate friendly. What's that, Kim?
Which may be why President Biden is looking at what's happening, where every time he tries to do something, the courts get involved. And now he's looking at apparently shaking up the Supreme Court, right? I mean, this is what he's thinking about, making some changes.
Well, you'd love to see an expansion of the Supreme Court. I would. And I've been saying that for a long time. And David Cay Johnston, who joins us in the second hour, he's been saying it for a long time. But it's not something that Biden can do out of personal fiat. He would need Congress to do it. Now, you can do it. You suspend the filibuster, and you could actually potentially do it. You can't do it now because you have divided Congress.
Can't he do anything? He's immune now from anything he did in office.
Well, in the movie, after the immunity decision, he then arrests Clarence Thomas and Alito.
Is that what it is? Yes.
Yeah, I think in the movie that's the way it goes down, but it doesn't do that in real life. Anyway, I'll just wrap up quickly because of I've got now Anthony is waiting. So again, I point to the Chevron deference case. That was huge. Essentially, what they've done is they've undercut government's ability to actually regulate many of these industries, corporate polluters, consumer protections being undone, all of that because of their decisions on Chevron, a 40-year precedent they undone, the same way they undid the wildly popular precedent that Roe set for women's reproductive freedoms. So last thing I would say is watch the courts, because the courts are the way in which policy is blunted, regardless of who the president is. That's your Bowling with Biden for today.
That's all for this edition.
There's your new later.
But join us again next time for Bowling with Biden.
Well, now I can do it, right? I mean,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Shout out to my handsome Greek turning the big 6-0.
Woo-hoo!
You bring joy to our day. The Mark Thompson Show from Julie. Julie's a big supporter, isn't she?
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, we love our Julie.
Big shout out.
Big shout out. Thank you. A $10 super sticker, or super chat, I should say. Happy birthday. And shout out to my handsome Greek.
Big shout out.
Your handsome Greek is our handsome Greek. Yeah. All right. We had a false start with him a few moments ago. I thought he was in the waiting room or whatever, with the green room. But as it turns out, he was not. So now I get a second bite at that apple. And I'm excited to do it. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
he is, he's a phenom on the Midas Touch Network. And he is, as you're aware, and I know many British people, many who have gone to Buckingham Palace and even been knighted. I know those people, right?
What?
Yes, but he is my favorite Britisher. On your feet for the great Anthony Davis, everyone. Yes, I am such a fan. He is the creator of the 5-Minute News. He is the Midas Touch host. All of your videos, my God, I'm just noticing that they are off the chain, as the kids in 1995 used to say. Yeah.
That's one way.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's blowing up. But you know, it's important times, right? If people in this moment can't start taking politics a little more seriously and see it less as a personality contest and more as Armageddon, then you know we're doing something wrong.
Yeah, sadly, I think you're right. The personality contest continues to inform people's decision making, even if they don't want to admit it, you know. And campaigning and the media ecosphere is an important part of this, Anthony Davis. And right now, and certainly in the short run that she's had, I'd say Kamala Harris has benefited a bit from both this pent-up enthusiasm that's there on the Democratic side, but also maybe the media had a little latent enthusiasm for something new, something apart from Joe Biden. So when he stepped back, they're all there. But now the media is clapping back, right? They want their piece of Kamala Harris in a sit-down.
Yeah, I think so. And she should not sit down with the networks. I mean, she has absolutely no reason to do that. The networks have failed to do proper journalism in this, in the last decade, it seems, certainly with them emboldening Trump and putting Trump on a pedestal as they have. And so, yeah, I like the fact that Kamala Harris knows this. And I like the fact that when she comes into contact with the press, normally at some kind of a, at a gathering or informal conference, she's like, she's not generous with them. She's like, leave me alone. And even Biden's doing that now. He's like, go write something good. And I really feel like it's about time that politicians, instead of desperately courting the media, actually realize that there is life outside of the media because of social media and because of independent media and because of all these other platforms. So, yeah, I just don't think Kamala Harris should be doing debates. I don't think she should be doing any kind of sit down with the press, especially Meet the Press and these types of shows that are just painful these days to watch. Just agony. Do you get the same feeling as me when I watch these shows? I'm just like, what is happening here? This is so dated.
Well, it's a legacy show.
Yeah.
I'm stuck between finding it my comfort viewing because I grew up with it. My house, grew up in Washington, D.C., and there was just tons of politics in my house always,
Yeah.
But realizing is the thing I'm stuck with, that it's all garbage because you have the surrogates on there. I mean, you have Donna Brazile, for example, in the case of ABC, and then they have the surrogate. They had Chris Christie, but now it's a different guy. And I mean, they're competent, but they represent such predictable positions, and you're just hearing essentially pieces of campaign stump speeches. You get no Reince Priebus on there. I mean, it's objectionable in the extreme. So my point is, in mentioning that, you get no light, you only get heat,
and they're fake as well. You and I have worked in the media long enough to know that when you get into these environments that require large crews and an environment where you have to have a script effectively in order for everything to work, the cameras need to know, and there's a director, and so it is a production. And the advantage of independent media is that we don't need to have a crew of thousands in order to get to the point. And I think that, my least favorite thing about network is when they say, we've run out of time. And it's like, well, there shouldn't be a clock on this. But because they've got commercial breaks to go to and because they're on a network, and at the end of the day, running out of time is the worst excuse for not doing proper journalism. In the same way that pre-printed questions infuriate me in this environment. Because if the answer that you get given off the first question takes you in a new direction, go with it. Don't go back to your questions that were written by an intern 3 days ago. And invariably, I fear that is what's happening in network.
Yeah, I mean, that might be a bit of an extreme interpretation, but I do accept your point, which is that oftentimes, because of time constraints and other sort of considerations, you don't end up with what is sort of an organic back and forth, and that there are any follow-ups. And I would just say this, and then I'd like to move on, but on the question of her sitting down, you and I are in agreement on this, and I've been saying, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I don't get why she'd sit down with this media for a gotcha interview with Lester Holt or whomever. I don't get it. She's not an empty suit. You can tell by her track record that she's not. I mean, she's risen to some of the highest levels of political life, and you don't get there being a DA, a senator. You don't get there by being an empty suit and sleeping your way to the top, or whatever the other crap that I sometimes see.
Especially as a person of color.
Thank you.
As
and
a
a
person
woman.
of color
A woman.
and as a woman, right, in this country. It is twice as hard as a woman. It is 3 times as hard as a person of color. It is 4 times as hard being a person of color and female to get where she's got. And, the fact that Trump especially just kind of criticizes her, and, there is this, it's so frustrating because, people criticize her because they don't think she did enough as vice president. Do you know how awful that job is? You can't do anything as vice president. You just have to wait. Wait for somebody to die.
Right. It's like being in the understudy in the theater, you know.
Exactly that. And so now I've noticed that since she's not got the Joe Biden shackles on anymore, we're starting to really see who she is. Her personality's coming through, and she's not frightened because she is ambitious. She's not frightened to show that ambition. And you need that if you're running for president. So, no, I think, she is the right person in this moment at the right time, and I know that she will be successful. Whether Trump concedes defeat or not is another question.
Yeah, Anthony Davis feels that she will win. I'm less completely convinced of that, although I do think this is an election that will be punctuated by all sorts of issues that don't have to do with a direct counting of votes. I mean, I think it's going to end up in the courts. We'll talk about that in a second. But I just wanted to mention the John Adams quote, which I love. He was vice president and, as you know, one of the fathers of our nation. My country has in its wisdom contrived for me the most insignificant office that ever the invention of man contrived or his imagination conceived. He was talking about the vice presidency. Again, you do nothing but wait for the president to have the bad day where the president goes away and now you're president. I wanted to ask you about what's happening in Georgia. Finally, the flank of lawyers who need to handle a lot of what's planned in Georgia, which is the lack of certification of the vote, have shown up, and they're challenging in court this whole strategy. I wonder if you could speak to that for a moment.
I'm not an expert on this, but I recognize that Georgia is a test location, isn't it? It's a test district for whether or not our democracy will hold. And we have all the history with Trump and Brad Raffensperger and, find me votes and refusing to certify. I think that is the blueprint for what Trump and the Heritage Foundation are planning for this November. This idea of not certifying the election, kicking it back to the courts, and as you alluded to earlier. And so what I'm hoping in Georgia is that if they can get their house in order, then it might suggest to those who are behind this scheme to cheat in November that actually it won't be as simple as they think. Because, I look to Kevin Roberts, who runs the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025, and he's been saying, we've got a plan and they don't know what's coming and we've got it all sewn up. And I think that they have reassured Donald Trump that there is a plan in place to get him elected, and that's why he doesn't feel the need to campaign as much as is necessary. Because, he can't afford to lose because he's going to prison, and he knows it. So I do think that there is this reassurance and there is this kind of far-right Christian nationalist plan, and that they think that they've worked it out. And so I'm hoping that Georgia sets the example to say, this isn't happening.
Yeah, and I don't know how you handicap the Georgia court situation because it will ultimately come down to these court cases, but the Democrats filed, I think, a 39-page legal argument, and they're trying to handle it that way to block this GOP-backed certification rule. I mean, and it's on the books now that essentially you don't have to certify the vote. And there are all these counties that have to certify votes. It's not like one central mothership in Georgia that has to. So all of these various counties, and they're Trumpies that are in all of these different spots, or many of these different spots. There's 3 out of 5 in
Georgia. There's 3 Trumpies out of the 5-member board, right? And so, it is stacked. And that's why we're saying that in these battleground states, Trump's people have tried to stack it so that it comes down to a decision that is made by MAGA Republicans. And that is terrifying.
Especially when you consider that Trump lost Georgia by, well, we know, right? 10,000-ish votes.
7,653 or whatever.
There you go. Yeah. So the idea that some votes would not be certified is a huge block potentially to a legitimate election. Yeah. I mean, again, this is in addition to all the other ways in which there can be issues. RFK Jr., how do you? Yeah.
Well, have you heard the news this morning about RFK Jr.?
I thought that he can't get off some of the state ballots is what I saw.
Worse than that, Trump is appointing RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, who's a former Democratic congresswoman, to be his transition team for the campaign.
I see.
So he's been elevated to the role of transition team, which in one way it kind of satisfies the fact that he wanted something to do, rather than he be put in charge of child vaccines under the Trump administration. But, Trump really feels like there is value in making use of RFK Jr. I personally think that RFK Jr. is much better off in the Trump camp and taking him out of the loop in terms of an option to vote for. And I think it frees up voters to go to Kamala Harris and choose democracy, because it was just confusing having this kind of love triangle. But
so
now
it's a net win for
camp.
Net win for Kamala Harris is the way you compute it.
Isn't it interesting that people can't really decide? Like, that's how crap American politics is, that people can't decide if this third-party candidate is a good thing for the left or for the right. Like, that's how frickin' weird it is in this country. In the same way that people can't even work out who's in the lead because it's so weird. And that is because the system, the electoral college system, is so rigged and so complex and so badly, created so badly and is so desperate for reform. But it means that you and I can disagree about who's going to win because the polls we can't even bother to look to.
Sure.
And even because
the people's voice is really repressed in so many ways in this country. And the irony is that we celebrate and peacock about the fact that we're the country that it was the first one that had a real representation of the people's voice as a democratic republic, that our founding fathers figured out a way and a system whereby the people could elect the president. I mean, it's absurd on its face given what we've seen.
Well, all of the systems are absurd. The filibuster is absurd. The electoral college system is absurd. This checks and balances phrase is absurd. The oversight is absurd because none of it has worked. All of these things that supposedly the U.S. has to protect it has failed because Donald Trump should have been incarcerated on the 7th of January, 2021. And yet he's running for president somehow.
I mean, there is an insanity to that on its face as well. I'm glad you mentioned Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. together because they both do something that is particularly galling to me, and that is they play. And I was mentioning before that Tulsi Gabbard is someone who does this with great credibility because of her distinguished military record and because she also speaks quite well on the stump. Yeah. The point that she makes, and again, RFK Jr. does it as well, is that Donald Trump didn't get us into any wars. I want to end these forever wars. And then they expand from there. But that really doesn't take stock of what Trump did under his presidency or even want to do under his presidency.
Well, the problem is it's so much of the rhetoric is untrue. So when Trump says there was no war under me, he's lying. He's absolutely lying. I mean, the conflict we're seeing in Gaza right now is courtesy of Donald Trump. The conflict we're seeing in Ukraine now is courtesy of Donald Trump. The conflict in Yemen is courtesy of Donald Trump. Like, all of this stuff has an effect. And so
he took out Soleimani, too. I mean, that was like that out of nowhere.
Yeah, he took out Soleimani as a distraction to his impeachment. If you look at the timeline, he was being impeached. He didn't want to have those negative headlines. So he thought, well, I'll do something that is going to make me look like a strong man. Says to his generals, okay, who can we kill? Soleimani, who is one of many, incidentally. You know, the moment that Qasem Soleimani is down, there's another, another Iranian leader or military leader to take over. But the biggest issue with Soleimani was that it put the Iranians on high alert, and they accidentally identified a Ukrainian Airlines plane that was full of 150-odd passengers as an incoming missile, and they shot it down. Again, Donald Trump, inconceivably appalling at these decisions of war. And that is why someone like him, with his mental pathology and with his flawed personality, should never be commander-in-chief, because he's literally making military decisions based on vanity. It's terrifying. So all this stuff about he'll be a dictator for a day or on day one, he was a dictator for 4 years. I lived through it. You lived through it. Everything from disappearing people off the streets of Portland during a peaceful protest, gassing people outside the Capitol. All of this stuff is the behavior of a dictator. And so why the media focused on that day one thing and didn't compare him to the dictators in history, I have no idea.
Well, I also just like that you mentioned sort of the ham-fisted way in which he was handling the military, because when you get Gabbard and RFK Jr. in there, Gabbard speaks sort of to his competence as a chief executive vis-a-vis the military. That's absurd, absolutely absurd. He was talking about nuking countries. How come we have this nuclear arsenal and we don't use it? I mean, he was reckless and ill-informed or uninformed on any number of things. But again, Gabbard speaks with a sort of gravitas on these issues that is really damaging, and I think can bolster this notion that, Trump has some competence, even though we know he does not.
But she was a Democrat, Mark. I mean, this is what's so crazy about it, is that, how do you switch from being a Democrat in America to following a far-right nutcase? Like, how do you make that switch and have any morals or pride or moral compass? I mean, that is what the tragedy, and of course you can say the same for RFK Jr. and his family have denounced him in his decision to endorse Donald Trump. Didn't you love the fact that he goes, I am not ending my campaign, I am suspending it. Right. I was like, okay, which one of those? He's like, you can vote for me, you can still vote for me, but you can't vote for me. Okay, in battleground states you can't vote for me, but elsewhere you can vote for me, but I've ended my campaign, except I haven't. I've just suspended it. I mean, I made a video about that address, of which it lasted 45 minutes. I could only get 2 minutes of material that actually was coherent. He is off the planet, that guy. I mean, this is my concern. So it's all very well putting these two in as the transition team experts, but he's nuts and she's a traitor.
I mean, the idea, look, the Trump White House was occupied by, when he won last time, family members were really influencing policy.
Yeah.
Lobbyists were influencing policy at the EPA, at Commerce, at Interior, all of those departments run by lobbyists. And of course, they had to resign because they were corrupt. It was total incompetence. Now they'll have a game plan because of Project 2025. But anyway, RFK Jr. is having trouble getting off of some of these states in which he wants to take his name off the ballot. I did want to recognize this super chat from Dennis. Dennis Fahey, first of all, a $100 super chat.
Big shout out.
It really, thank you. It makes showing up to work worthwhile today for the... Remember, several GOP Georgia politicians are in the indictment handed to Fani Willis to prosecute. She did not yet pursue them. No accident they went after her to stall that trial. Yeah, this is something else going on in Georgia, and then I'll mention this as well to David Cay Johnston, who does a lot of stuff with the law, that this Fani Willis trial has been stalled and parked in so many ways, right? They talk about her issues and conflicts of interest, and there are any ways in which this Georgia trial, which really seemed on its face to have legitimacy, has been kind of sidelined.
Well, she shouldn't have stooped the prosecutor. That's number one.
Right.
We know that. This is not a good idea. And it reminds me a little bit of, a lot of these DAs, they kind of come out and they are publicly critical of Donald Trump, and he uses that. And, I just don't think that's the way to behave. I think you need to go to ground like Jack Smith did or Robert Mueller did, where nobody really knows what you think. You just get on with the business of prosecuting. So from that perspective, I'm a little annoyed with Fani Willis, but she's also allowed to have a personal life, and the prosecutor that she had a relationship with is on the same side. So what difference? I never really understood that. I couldn't see a conflict of interest anywhere. What I do see, though, is the GOP will always bring up anything that they can. Hunter Biden would never have been prosecuted if there wasn't a biased decision behind that. It's like those types of crimes don't even get heard.
Well, that was the remarkable thing to me, is that Biden, out of a desire to not have the appearance of conflict,
right,
left that special prosecutor in and actually expanded the office. They added a second attorney there to go after his own son. Do you think something like that would happen under a GOP administration?
Not in a million years. And, look, we've seen it, haven't we? We've seen it with Jared Kushner and $2 billion from the Saudis, for example. But that aside, and I should say as an aside, I really hope that Joe Biden pardons Hunter Biden in the last 7 days of his presidency. I think that absolutely has to happen. But, in terms of Georgia, it should be cut and dry, mainly because we have a recording of Donald Trump trying to extort the Brad Raffensperger. But in terms of this, the Democrats suing over these new election rules, America is a lawless country. It really is. The fact that you have to sue people in order to get justice. The law in itself does not stand up to scrutiny. Where I'm from, no one sues anybody because the law is the law. And it's like, oh, you broke the law. Okay, well, that's fine. Well, you lost, or you've been fined, or you've been incarcerated. But here it's like the law does not stand up to scrutiny because it's open to interpretation, because these DAs and prosecutors are invariably political, and judges are political and politically appointed.
Well, how are the barristers and judges?
They're not politically appointed.
They're not.
No.
So how does a judge come to power in Britain?
Well, because the judiciary is considered to be completely separate of politics. It just is. And so you
apply for, I know nothing about how this works. A judge, I'm just curious as a digression. So if I want to get a judgeship, I show my CV, and eventually when there's an opening, I'm considered, or how does it work?
Yeah, but the decision is made by a group that is non-political.
I see.
And so, it is done, but it has nothing to do with the Attorney General, for example. The Attorney General is irrelevant in this. So I just think that you're so used to your system here that you think, well, that's how it's done everywhere. And it isn't. And so that's why you can't get justice in America, because the judiciary is political. But, ultimately the law should be the law. And so that's why we don't need to sue people in England. We just follow the law. Here, the fact that just the idea that a kind of the local authority is suing the local authority, right? That's effectively what's happening. It's like the council is suing the council. It doesn't make any sense to me. And so, the whole kind of litigious aspect to getting justice in America, the reason it's so frustrating is because invariably the only people that can afford lawyers, and therefore to get justice, are the rich. And that is why Donald Trump has not been held accountable, and that is why these lawsuits take forever, because lawyers are getting rich along the way. It's a very weird country. I wouldn't live anywhere else, but this is a weird country.
The one thing I would say is that, and I maybe it's just because, as you say, I grew up in this system and I'm used to it, but it is the way you, quote, get justice. The way you hold corporate polluters to account, the way you hold big companies to account. The only thing they care about is money. So you sue them for big money. That's the only penalty that matters. We saw it happen in 2008. I mean, nobody went to serve an hour of prison time after these fraudulent financial vehicles were sold to so many Americans and created a market crash and created a crisis.
Whereas in Britain, they did go to prison. In Britain, there was about a dozen of these, bank bosses that were held accountable. But in the U.S., it just didn't happen, and so it's so interesting. We really do need to spend more time looking around the world and seeing how other nations kind of deal with criminal justice, because it seems to me that in the U.S., if you're a young black man caught dealing marijuana in the wrong state, you're going to be incarcerated for potentially a decade. But if you're a wealthy white conservative with deep pockets and you get caught trying to overturn a legitimate United States election, then you get to walk free and you get to run again 4 years later.
Yeah, just insane. And what they did to those poor Georgia poll workers, those women who do the only thing that, in the case of Donald Trump, he's never done, which is public service. It was horrifying. It was horrifying. And Giuliani, of course, led that parade. So that for another time.
Well, at least they got paid out, the mother and daughter. At least they,
they got the judgment. They got the judgment.
Whether
I don't know if they're going to get the
paid
money
up or not, who knows? But the point is that, they were so proud of that job. I mean, she'd done it for years, the mum. It was like something she really looked forward to doing.
Yeah, proudly. And it's, and this is the chilling effect that it has on public service and, on others working on the polls and the election process. I mean, if you think, well, I want to, but I don't want my life, laid bare and, armed men coming to my residence, which is exactly what happened in their case. Anyway, we've got to wrap up. You know what? We're out of time. I mean,
What?
Got to go to commercials.
Find Anthony Davis on the 5 Minute News on the Midas Touch Network. He's got 3 shows, constant videos. I think you're up to 3 shows, something like that now.
Something like that, yeah.
We love your work and we love you stopping through. And there he is. That's with the good doctor who you do regular stuff with, who is essentially x-raying Donald Trump's mind. Right.
She's very impressive. Dr. Bandy Lee, who has been blacklisted from the media for telling the truth. And so we thought it would be only appropriate in these last few months before Election Day to give her a platform. So we've handed the weekend show guest slot over to her every week. And she will be joining us to, she's not analyzing Donald Trump as a patient. She says that the United States is the patient. The voters are the patients. And so that's where her analysis is. But she basically says Donald Trump is not fit for any job, let alone the presidency. And, she and a whole bunch of psychiatric experts have done an assessment of him, a proper official assessment. And he failed basic mental competency. And that's who we're dealing with.
Well, man, woman, camera, TV. I don't know how you can fight that. That seems to be all the evidence you need.
Genius.
Again, thank you, Anthony Davis. We appreciate you stopping through here. Everyone, we look forward to your next visit and seeing you on 5 Minute News and beyond at Midas Touch Network. Anthony Davis, everybody.
Thank you, Mark.
On your feet, damn it. On your feet. Wow. Love my Anthony Davis.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Right on, everybody. Thank you for being here. David Cay Johnston, the Pulitzer Prize winner, is minutes away. I want to talk about Ukraine. We'll talk about the situation in Georgia, the actual legal hopes that can reasonably be placed around a lot of these democratic moves in the courts in Georgia to blunt the planned blocking of certification of the vote coming in November. That, among other things, with David Cay Johnston. But right now, we go to the world of tech. On Tuesdays, we like to quickly check in with a guy who reported on tech for USA Today for so long. He still writes about tech, and he does his Photo Walks TV. He is the great Jefferson Graham. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Mark.
Thank you for joining us. I know that there is a new iPhone coming. I desperately need it. You've told me don't replace the one I have until the new version comes out. What's the date of the new version, and what can you tell us?
Yesterday, Apple announced that they will be unveiling that new iPhone, the iPhone 16, on September 9th. And so logic says that it will then be in stores 10 days later on Friday. Do I have my calendar in front of me? Let's find out. That would be the 20th. It would be my
so it's that following Friday that it comes. And are there still lines to get the latest iPhone, or like there used to be years ago?
No, those days are long gone. Basically, they announce a pre-sale date, and people go online and they put in their orders, and they all get it shipped. All the people who want it be first get it shipped if they do the pre-sale, and they don't wait online anymore, and it works very efficiently. But yes, I used to cover those lines. I used to stand out there talking to people that had been in tents for 3 days so they could have the first iPhone.
It was the mother's milk of local news, the lines for the new iPhone. The advantages, are there any to the way you order? Like, are those pre-order people, is that a better way to order, or do you want to?
Definitely.
In other words, you don't need to go to a Verizon store or a T-Mobile store or whatever it is. No.
They will announce on Monday the 9th what day the pre-orders will be starting, and I assume it'll be the Friday, 4 days later. And put in the order. You could always return the phone. You could always return it, but buy the phone, get it done, because otherwise you could go to the store that Saturday afternoon and they could be sold out. And then it'll be a 4-week lag time. It's usually a 4 to 6 week lag time. There'll be a handful of phones, and then people will just have to wait to have them delivered. So I would definitely recommend doing the pre-order.
I guess that's what I need to do, though, is the pre-order. I mean, my phone, the camera doesn't work. A wide-angle lens doesn't work. So I kind of really want to get a new one. But you've told me to wait, and I've waited patiently.
Okay.
So I'll be one.
And I'm going to be there at the event this year. So
you're going to cover it. So what can you tell us? Is this new iPhone worth getting from what you've seen?
I haven't seen. So I won't see till I go there.
It says Apple announcing, and I'm covering it. I can preview in your email to me, but you really cannot preview, can you?
No, what I can preview is what is expected.
All right. Well, then start previewing. Damn it.
Damn it. Okay.
All right.
A lot of AI features that were touted in June when they announced them, email summaries, more talkative Siri, though, however, it is also expected that those are going to take a while to hit the new phone.
Oh my God, a new talkative Siri is like a nightmare. Oh my God.
More talkative, more chatty.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
They have to release a new iPhone every year, and so some of this stuff is just like improvements around the edges.
Bigger, better, faster, more responsive, improved battery, yada, yada, yada. The greatest phone that's ever been made. If you don't buy it, you will definitely feel bad. All that sort of stuff. And I read an analyst report this morning that's predicting that they're going to sell 240 million iPhones. Now, they had been doing about 200 million. And there's no other product in the United States that sells 200 million units of anything. Chrysler doesn't sell 200 million Cadillacs. They may sell, I don't know what the numbers are for cars, but I guarantee you it's not 200 million. And it could be that theoretically General Motors with all their lines would sell 200 million, but they're not selling 200 million of any product. There's no TV that's selling 200 million. So it's unbelievable what they push out, and that they do it every September. People are trained. Oh, new iPhone's out, better go buy a new one. And if they didn't put out a new one, they wouldn't sell 200 million phones.
And where is the, that explains it quite well. Where is the iPhone made?
It's made in China, Shenzhen.
Yeah, at that factory where people are jumping out the windows, Foxconn.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
there's different little components are made in other places, but they're assembled in China.
And they're going to finally, it sounds like with all the success, they're going to upgrade the lifestyle for those poor workers who put that phone together. Is that in the plans for the future or not, Jefferson
I hadn't
Graham?
heard that. When was that announced?
All right. The AI that you talked about with Google on the fake photos, et cetera.
Yeah.
You wrote a column about this. You called the company evil. You said it could destroy photography as we know it. You really went after Google. How dare you? What do you say now?
You cannot say you love your country.
Exactly. Google and this country are like, what do you say now?
I say that Photoshop has been around. Editing tools have been around to tweak photos, to add things and subtract them.
And I'm asking you this, excuse me for interrupting, but because you got some blowback from your readers, and I'm wondering, okay, so now continue.
So again, Photoshop's been around, editing tools have been around, and so those people would say, they've been there. You could do this stuff forever. What's the big deal? Life goes on. Well, they've not been available in mobile photography tools. They've not been available on your phone that you could just say, put a pig in this image. Have horns come out of Mark's ears. Let's paint Mark's face red. Let's turn him into the devil. Let's do all these things and alter them, and then just click on Facebook, click on Twitter, whatever, Instagram. All these fake photos are being generated in easy from the phone. Click a button, there it is, and no labeling whatsoever. So it has the potential to litter social media with all these phony photos. Right now, a lot of times you're looking at Instagram, you don't know what's right and what's wrong, and how people are fooling you with the tweaking of the colors and different things. But this has the potential to be really bad. All Google has to do is label them as fake lie photos.
Well, that's kind of what you're saying. This is really important. You're not saying to take away that technology or not making it available. You're saying let's watermark it somehow so everybody knows.
Yes.
Seems like a reasonable.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I mean, I also think kind of what you were talking about is sort of a cartoonish thing where you add horns, et cetera. That's maybe not the best example of what bothers you, because what bothers you is the stuff that you cannot tell.
Right.
Is doctored in some way. Isn't that correct?
One of the pictures I saw was of a bicycle messenger in New York with a dog sitting on the back of his bike. That was fake. It was a bike messenger. There was no dog there. Little things like that.
Sure.
I mean, obviously, if I paint your face red and I put horns on you, we all know that I doctored the photo, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But the other
what
stuff,
I saw
you
with
do
the
not.
bike messenger and the dog, that just looked totally 100% real.
Yeah.
And I hope that Apple's AI features aren't going to go crazy with AI in the camera. We'll find out.
What's clear to me is going back decades, you needed to be a real computer person to be able to navigate some of the stuff that now we talk about. Well, it's going to be on your phone, and it's, you know this better than anyone. And now they've made these technologies so available. It's interesting to hear you go, they become almost too available, this AI and your ability to manipulate visuals to the point that you can't tell whether they're real or fake. This has become a real problem, and it could become a societal issue, I think is what I'm getting from you.
Totally. And remember that newspapers, like the one I used to work for, they have rules. You can't alter a photo. I can't take that guitar behind me. I can't wipe it out of the photo, even if my head was too close to it and the guitar neck is sticking out of my head. I can't change anything. I can't take lines away. And AP, the Associated Press, they have rules about what you can do and what you can't do. But there are no rules on social media.
Now, finally, Gannett. You say that they've announced they're shutting down Reviewed.com. Why is Reviewed.com important?
Really interesting. Okay, anybody out there has noticed that there's unbelievable amounts of coverage of Amazon and how much things cost on Amazon. If you go to any website in November, it seems to be from the New York Times to the LA Times to whatever, they'll say Amazon's having quite a deal. We went through all the products so that you wouldn't have to go through it, and boy, will you save money. And then you go look and you could only save $2 or $3. You say, well, why was I reading that? Well, you're reading that because Amazon is giving kickback, commission kickback, that if you do an article like this and somebody clicks on it and buys it, you'll get a cut of it. And so here's this site called review.com. It was all based on affiliate links. Every article in there was based on you click it and we make money. And it's a different form of advertising. It's just very, very suspect, I felt. So Gannett announced, shockingly, because when I was at USA Today, they were making a lot of money. They announced that they were shutting it down. And apparently Google's algorithm has changed to the point where they saw the fake articles and they started downgrading them. And Gannett was paying more money to salaries than they were bringing in. And I think this is great for the consumer that, hopefully a lot of the other people that are doing it maybe won't want to do it because they're not making money. I do think the New York Times does it well with Wirecutter, but still, I think everything I read there is suspect because it just sends you right to Amazon. What do you think, Mark?
Right. No, I mean, I find these really instructive and really important. The reviews are what it's all about. But then when it's revealed that these reviews are paid for, it's, how can that not be good to get rid of something like that? It's essentially another sponsorship site. As it is when you go to Amazon, I think you did a segment with us about this once before, you're essentially seeing pages of sponsored placement. In other words, when we search for whatever it might be, you're seeing whatever it might be all sponsored for the first 4 pages. You're not really getting some random or even review-based queue or line of products, right?
I believe they say suggested.
Right? Yeah. Well, I'll see the word sponsored too. That's the first one that comes up. It actually says sponsored, I think, on Amazon.
Recommended. I think it's
recommended. Okay.
Yeah, and it's recommended because we'll make more money on it.
Yeah. What's up on PhotoWalks TV this week?
It's very interesting. We were talking about AI, and I am hit up all the time by people that say, hey, you've been to Japan. Where should I go? What should I do? Well, I've got all these videos on there, but they're not taking the time to watch them, which they should, but they're not, so that's okay. So I decided that after reading a relative's AI-generated list of what she should do in Japan, had about 2,000 things to do in 3 days, I would do some short, to-the-point itineraries. 5 things to do everywhere you go. And so I just finished San Diego, and I'm doing Atlanta, and I did Osaka. So I'm putting a bunch of them out this weekend for some quick hit itineraries.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Great. Something to look forward to. And that will hit Saturday, right?
Yes, and human generated.
How quaint. What a throwback. Find him on PhotoWalks TV. Check him out. Subscribe to his YouTube channel. Get it going. And then find him here with us on Tuesdays. How about it?
And Thursday night.
On Thursday night, Jeff will be there for the meetup. Links go out today for that. So you'll join us Thursday. If you don't get your link, let me know. That'll be sent out later tonight. Love our Jefferson Graham. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
The Mark Thompson Show.
David Cay Johnston, the Pulitzer Prize winner, joins in minutes. We'll talk about the Ukraine situation, believe it or not. We haven't touched on it yet in this hour, and we'll touch on it next hour with David. It is changing. The arithmetic on Ukraine may be changing. The war footing they're on with Russia, I mean, that's a polite way to put it. That's changing. We'll talk about the Georgia election case, of course. And if I can get to some of the other stuff that's related to the election, I'm talking about RFK unable to withdraw his name from some state ballots. We've got a lot we can get to on that as well. So much to do. Ricky O'Bear has it. Where's my Ricky O'Bear? hit the thumbs up button, and then subscribe to the show if you would. Costs you nothing.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Smash that like button. And we look forward to many days ahead with your support. Yeah, we're sold out of that Thursday meetup. I got to get the links out today. It's actually a little more complicated than it's got to be done right. And I want to do it today so that if people don't get it tomorrow, we can make sure they get them. But again, it's not for broadcast. It is just off air, and it'll be a cavalcade of stars. So looking forward to that, in addition to many of the regulars and people you know from the show. So everybody who is in on the meetup, it's our big end of summer meetup. Should have a lot of fun. Kim's News.
Kim, how are you?
And then the great David Cay Johnston. Thanks for being here, Mark Thompson.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and this report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Here it is, just 10 weeks to go until Election Day. Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz kick off a bus tour in the battleground state of Georgia tomorrow. Former President Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance will also hold events in swing states this week as well. Voters in several states will soon be able to cast their ballots in the 2024 presidential election. The little ballot boxes there. Early voting starts next month in Virginia, Minnesota, South Dakota, Vermont, Illinois, and in the swing state of Pennsylvania. Nearly every voting state offers mail-in or vote-in-person options, so if those are one of your states, you have different ways to get the job done. In Texas, a judge is temporarily blocking a Biden administration policy that would give legal status to illegal immigrants married to American citizens. And the Biden administration plan started earlier this month. It would have affected about 500,000 immigrants in the United States. The ruling blocked the program for 14 days as a federal court considers this challenge led by 16 Republican-led states.
This is a bit of what I was talking about in the last hour when I talk about the fact that the courts get in the way of any kind of presidential agenda and even kind of presidential and democratic strategies when it comes to the environment, when it comes to consumer protections, when it comes to immigration policy. The courts have increasingly blunted the ability of the chief executive to get things done. So Kamala Harris wins again. I don't know that a lot of these agenda items that you might associate with the Democrats ever get done. And in fact, I'd suggest, as I detailed for you in the last half hour, a lot of the stuff that they had already put into play, they can get undone as well. Consumer protections, corporate polluter regulations, etc. So the courts are the place where the action is.
Yeah, and that's the case here as well. Let's talk about Mark Zuckerberg. Meta CEO admitting the Biden administration pressured Facebook to censor Americans. He sent a letter to the House Judiciary Committee saying the administration leaned on the social media company to censor some content. Meta, he says, has put policies into place to ensure similar censorship of stories does not happen again. Former President Trump is questioning why he should debate Vice President Kamala Harris on ABC News next month. The two are scheduled to take the stage on the network September 10th in Philadelphia, but he posted on Truth Social that he watched an interview with Republican Senator Tom Cotton on ABC, which he called biased. He said the network held a discussion with a panel of so-called Trump haters, so laying the groundwork to get out of it.
Yeah, he's working the refs a lot so that if things don't go well, he can say, well, you know, I told you it's a bunch of biased media people doing it. ABC, enemy territory for me. And if it goes well, he triumphed over all of that. I mean, he's absolutely working the refs. Nobody works the refs like Trump works the refs. We'll talk to David Cay Johnston about it, too.
2 people are dead, one seriously injured after a plane tire exploded at a maintenance facility near the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. The incident reportedly happened as the plane's tire was being removed this morning. It killed a Delta employee and a contractor and injured a second Delta employee. That plane tire just exploded. Home interest rates in California have dropped, according to the California Association of Realtors. But what we know is that as of Monday, the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate was 5.75%. That according to Zillow. Statewide, the median home price slipped in July for the second month in a row after setting a record high in May. The association said its July home sales price report, the median price for an existing single-family home in the state of California is now $886,560. So, really affordable for the middle-class family.
Oh, my God. That's disgusting.
California is the first to use a massive air tanker to fight wildfires and better protect homes. It's a C-130 Hercules, and it hit the skies yesterday. Eventually, it'll be followed by 6 more aircraft that California is retrofitting and deploying. Governor Gavin Newsom says the climate crisis has made wildfires more destructive, and it's time to match these threats with new resources. So these planes, these C-130 Hercules planes, can fly 800 miles and carry 4,000 gallons of fire retardant. More homeowners are being affected by California's insurance crisis, but in a new way. About 17,000 will need to find new fire coverage because Liberty Mutual Fire Insurance Company will stop renewing policies beginning next month. They are phasing out old technology used to manage those dwelling fire policies and can't create a new system, they say. So there you go. Customers will still be covered through Liberty Safeco brand.
Well, and there's essentially the California underwritten insurance, but that is a tepid insurance plan that I suppose if it was stressed in any way, you'd find out how it really can't pay out. But otherwise, you can't sell a house. I mean, if you have a mortgage, there has to be insurance. Otherwise, you can't sell a house.
No. Well, you can't even buy a house.
Can't buy a house, can't sell a house, however you want to
own a
look
house.
At it. Exactly.
Yeah, that's done.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I know David Cay Johnston is waiting, and we hate to keep him waiting, so I'll do this last story. NFL stars Travis and Jason Kelce are signing a new podcast deal with Amazon's Wondery. The deal for the brothers' New Heights podcast is reportedly worth $100 million. New Heights will still be widely available on podcast platforms, but it'll be available early and ad-free on Wondery Plus. New Heights was named Podcast of the Year at the 2024 iHeart Podcast Awards, and clearly they haven't heard The Mark Thompson Show. This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. It is a place, yes it is, to get a little bit of heaven in your cup, and it is so good. Fresh, hand-roasted, really good coffee. What are you drinking right now?
I've got the French press going today, and I just have a quick sip right now.
Yeah.
It's perfect. Yeah, Coachella Valley Coffee, get 10% off anything that they have on their website. Coffees, teas, the cold brew. Someone sent me a comment in the comment section of YouTube because the cold brew is a hit in our house. In fact, we got a special pitcher just for the cold brew. All organic and from women-owned farms. You know, we've had the Roastmaster General Cliff on, and he talks about the fact that he likes to support and actually get started in business with women in Latin America, in Africa, because they actually take the money and begin a coffee business that he can actually turn into something. Wow, is that me with Cliff?
Yeah, it is.
Oh my God, that's very cool.
How cute.
Coachella Valley, I've got David Cay Johnston waiting, so I can't take my but CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. The thing I want to make sure that you do is use Mark T at checkout for 10% off. It is the best coffee on earth. Fresh crop, hand roasted, you will love it. Again, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, and hit the discount code Mark T for 10% off anything on the site at checkout.
Kim McAllister, it is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
All right. Oh, I hate to keep this guy waiting. He is a Pulitzer Prize winner and a professor at RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, where smart people go to school and even smarter people teach them. How about it for David Cay Johnston?
Hello, Mark.
Hello, sir. Well, we got a lot to get to, and thank you for hanging out with us for a few minutes. I wanted to start with Ukraine, because it seems as though that conflict has heated up now in ways it hadn't prior.
Yes, it has. There are numerous reports, I haven't seen any official confirmation, that the Ukrainians have begun a second incursion into Russia. And they're only using apparently a few hundred troops. One report said 300. But they're moving very quickly and they're occupying a lot of land. Now, of course, the Russian army at this point, with casualties of about 1,000 a day. And a casualty, for those who aren't familiar, is not necessarily a killing. It can mean you're injured or sick and taken out of the battlefield. So the loss of those soldiers, they're casualties to the conflict. 1,000 a day. And the Russian army, which has no sergeants for close-in tactical decisions, is now largely populated with conscripts and criminals taken out of the prisons. So this is not a highly motivated army. One of the problems the Ukrainians are going to face soon is the growing number of prisoners of war where the soldiers gave up to them. Of course, having done that, if they get exchanged back to Mother Russia, that may be the end of their existence.
Sure.
Given Putin's behavior. But the goal, it appears to some of the military analysts right now, is to occupy as much Russian territory as the Russians have taken in Ukraine, which has the smell of a swap to it,
sure,
to bring about an end to this. In addition, the Ukrainians, whose military tactics I think will be widely studied around the world for hundreds of years to come, they've been very smart about cutting off supply lines. So there are a number of bridges into the area that the Russians now control, and the Ukrainians now control in Russia. And the Russian soldiers, they left their dogs behind. They left half-eaten meals behind. I mean, they ran when they heard the Ukrainians were approaching. They have not totally destroyed bridges. What they've done is the same tactic they used earlier. With precision artillery, they put potholes or damage in the bridge so you can take a Toyota and maneuver your way very slowly across the bridge. But you can't take a tank, you can't take a 5-ton truck or any other heavy equipment across them. And that means that resupply is a serious problem for the Russian army. And all of this, of course, is putting pressure on Putin, where even Russian media, where the state, can throw you in prison if they don't like what you're reporting, is saying that, mothers of conscripts and girlfriends of conscripts are saying to the government, what are you doing? What are you doing? So public opinion, Russian culture, people will suffer a lot, but it appears that there is now resistance to that. And for those of you watching on the internet, there's a wonderful picture up that shows the kind of precision degradation of bridges rather than destruction of them.
Yeah, and those are even more than potholes, right? I mean, they're pothole.
Yes, potholes is a weak word. I apologize.
No, not so much that, but just to let people know who are listening on podcast, they're giant holes in this bridge. So it makes it's fascinating to hear you talking about that military strategy that I was unaware of. I've seen that Russia is now launching more missiles into Ukraine, trying to take out vital infrastructure there. So I'd suggest, based on what you're saying, they're trying to maybe navigate toward, I'm talking about the Ukrainians now, based on their incursions, navigate toward some settlement, some negotiation, certainly some leverage. And at the same time, the Russians are taking it to a different place too. Go ahead.
Yeah, that seems to be a more than reasonable interpretation here. Zelensky from day one has said there'll be no settlement without giving back our land, and that's presumed to include Crimea, which you'll recall in 2014 when Obama was president, men in uniforms but without insignia appeared. And Putin at the time said, of course, those aren't my soldiers. Everybody else was calling them Putin's little green men. Of course, once he had secured Crimea and gotten these quote unquote vote, to become part of Russia, he went, well, of course, those were my soldiers. And remember in all of this that in 1993, the Russian government in writing pledged to never invade Ukraine if it would turn over the nuclear weapons that were there to Russia. So Putin has no regard for agreements that have been made, and he's following the ancient Russian tradition that there are no rules in war. It's perfectly okay to attack hospitals and old people's homes, and places like that, which are clearly not in any civilized society military targets. But the Russians have done this at least going back, as far as I've read, into the middle of the 19th century.
2 points. One, I'd like to follow up on that Crimea thing in a second, but I, two, want to ask you about that guarantee that we made, the West made to Ukraine when they turned the nukes over. We sort of said, hey, don't worry, we got you. You know, you don't have to worry about if there's some kind of military attack, or the West will cover you. Can you speak to that, David?
Well, I think that in the Obama administration in 2014, they were not firm enough. I don't think Obama had the support in the Congress to be tougher
when he went into Crimea, when Putin went into Crimea.
And Putin went into Crimea, and the Ukrainian people in February of 2014 rose up and overthrew the Putin puppet who had built this palace that nobody knew about because it was behind a high wall and had multiple, huge numbers of acres around it. In Biden's case, he was cautious in defending, and it's only now that the Ukrainians are getting our almost best fighter planes. We withheld a lot of lethal weaponry from them, apparently out of a belief that we don't want to poke the bear and provoke a much larger conflict. I think in retrospect that was a mistake. I thought it was a mistake at the time. I was of the view that, we don't want to have American or NATO soldiers on the ground. We should be giving the Ukrainians every weapon they think they need. And if we want to put a control on them, you can't attack anything but a military target inside Russia and say maybe only within 100 kilometers, 60 miles. That's fine. But we should have been much tougher on the weaponry and much quicker. I mean, we didn't provide our best tanks to them until this year.
I think it's interesting how we've tried to split that baby, particularly going back to 2014, and it really hasn't worked out so well. But the idea that they'd fold Crimea, as you've noted, into some kind of settlement is fascinating as well. But
and I don't want anybody to think that I'm somebody who's in favor of war. I'm very much against that, and I want human beings to get past war, as quickly as we possibly can. But I don't expect it will happen, unfortunately, in my lifetime.
Yeah, sadly, it's a default position for all too many cultures and societies. So obviously, that's an ongoing thing. The other ongoing thing happening domestically is associated with the upcoming election, with just a few months to go. The question of certification has become something that's really relevant, particularly in the state of Georgia, where we've seen now this plan to not certify. This is something that you and I have spoken of before over the weeks. Essentially, it's a plan to prevent certification of the vote in various counties in Georgia, and somehow doing that, throw the vote into question, muddy the water that way. Now, what's happened just yesterday is that there is a group of Democratic lawyers who have put together a case, I think it's a 39-page argument, to try to take that voter certification law that was passed, which allowed essentially any administrator to block certification, now to take that policy to court in Georgia. Can you speak to that, David? Because you're the legal mind here.
Well, I think it's very clear at this point that there's been a broad legal strategy on how do we try to put the election into the House of Representatives, where each state gets one vote, and which would likely result in favoring the Republicans because of the fact that there are lots of small states, relatively lightly populated states like the Dakotas and Wyoming, which will have a Republican or Republican representative or representatives. In the Georgia case, what they've done is essentially empowered an attack on anybody who casts a vote anywhere in the state. The difficulty it poses is this: there's an extremely tight legal deadline for certifying the election results. It's not like, well, we can litigate this and it'll go on for 21 months. It has to get done in a matter of somewhere I read 6 days, but I think it's longer than that. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact time period, but the election's November 5th. The inauguration is January 20th. So we're talking about 10 weeks. And gumming up the works, throwing the validity of the election into doubt is clearly a strategy. And it's a strategy of people who don't believe in democracy and who don't have regard for what their fellow citizens want. And unfortunately, with the judges who've been appointed by Trump, if they get these cases, as we've seen with Judge Eileen Cannon, they may issue cockamamie rulings, and that takes a long time to sort them out. So, I think there's a potential for real trouble here. And Georgia is one of those states which could go either way.
Well, look, let's face it. In the last election, Biden won it by that 11,700 and 80.
99 votes.
Yeah, 79. So you're so very right, and it becomes a template, doesn't it, David? For that kind of blocking of the certification becomes a template for other states, like Arizona, for example.
Yeah, Arizona is the other good example of this, and in the 2020 election, Republicans who were elected or appointed as the leaders of election units, county and state level, have across the board said there was no measurable or significant cheating. Most of the cases that have been brought for double voting have been against Republicans who were supporting Donald Trump, even though the accusations have been against the Democrats. No significant evidence of people voting who are not American citizens, who can't vote in federal and state elections. Let me be clear, all across America, elections for things like school boards, school budgets, water districts, mosquito districts, you generally don't have to be a citizen to vote in those. You only have to be a local resident. My school district, I meet people all the time who are immigrants to America. They're professors at RIT or the University of Rochester or employees of one of the high-tech companies here. And they can vote in the school board elections, but they can't vote in the presidential elections. And undermining confidence in democracy is a core strategy of Vladimir Putin, President Xi, dictator Kim, the mullahs in Tehran. All of them want to undermine faith and trust in democracy.
Well, I will get to, sadly, there's a lot less to undermine than there used to be. You feel as though this democracy teeters in many ways, and that, you have the calls coming from the inside of the house type thing when it comes to this horror movie that is the election. And finally, on this question of the states, I'm just seeing that an Arizona judge set that trial date for January 5th, 2026. These are the people being tried in the criminal conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election, David. These are the people who are the fake electors. This whole plan, it's utterly insane that this would be a 2026 case for laws that were broken, allegedly, in 2020.
Absolutely. And when I read that it was moved to 2026, I thought it was a typo. That couldn't be true. So I went from the headline to the article and went, oh my God. The right to a speedy trial is not only the right of a defendant, it is also the right of the people. That is the prosecution. Because when you delay, witnesses forget, their memories get cloudy, people disappear, people die, people get sick. We want to have speedy trials. And I can't imagine any reason in the world to delay this trial about the 2020 election to 2026 with one possible exception. If there's a 5-year statute of limitations and something goes awry with that case, they won't be, I suspect, will not be able under Arizona law to go back and re-indict the suspects in the case. Delay, of course, has been what Donald learned from his, as he calls him, second father, Roy Cohn, back in the late 1960s and early 70s. And it's been a very effective strategy for him. and it's now been widely adopted. I mean, we really need to call out people who don't want to play fair. Democracy to work has to have some reasonable fairness. I'm not being Pollyanna-ish. People are going to have robust debate. There's going to be lots of vigorous arguments. Some people are going to behave badly, but what you're seeing the Trumpers do is try to institutionalize dishonesty. And that's part of a much bigger trend in this country. We've talked a little about in the past. The Supreme Court has pretty much legalized bribery of public officials. As long as you don't say, hey, Mark, as a U.S. Senator, if I give you this $50,000, will you do that for me? And I just say, gee, Mark, it'd be really nice if you could help me with this problem. And then later I tip you with $50,000. It's not a crime, according to our Supreme Court, which the founders would be rolling in their graves. And if anybody listening or watching wants to know more about this, there's a wonderful book by Zephyr Teachout. What a cool name. Zephyr.
That's a very cool name. Yeah.
Who is, she is a professor of law at, I believe, Fordham in New York City. Run for office, didn't do well. But it is about the framers of our Constitution being concerned not about individual venality. There will always be individual people who do corrupt things. The concern of the framers of our Constitution was institutional corruption. And she makes a compelling case. You don't need to be a lawyer. You don't have to have an advanced education to understand it. It's well written, and it's not that long.
As you talk about, the institutionalizing of these misdeeds or playing the edges, I think, wow, this is a fake elector scheme. I mean, this is a massive, bold-face criminal endeavor. As you say, I mean, it's not that, it makes gerrymandering seem like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, I'm astounded that, and you're right, that's got to be it. It's got to be, I'm going to extend this time out so that essentially the clock runs out on this case.
Right. And there are some historical antecedents to this. In the 1960s, there were alternative slates put forward for nominating conventions in the Democratic Party, but they had to get approved in order to get in there.
Sure, people knew they were alternate slates.
That's right. These were falsification of documents, lying on the documents, and a criminal conspiracy to undermine our election system. And that should be offensive to everybody. But I think we're going to see more of this. And the reason is that back in either 1969 or 70, when I didn't have any gray hair, there were stories that I read by colleagues of mine at the San Jose Mercury saying that, in 50 years, the year 2020, if the Republicans didn't change, they were going to become a permanent minority party because the demographics of the country were changing. Education, skin color, religiosity, some other factors. And as one of my best friends said to me when we had lunch about this, 5 years ago, and I brought it up, he looked at me and he said, but they can't change. The Republicans are who they are. They cannot change. And I think he's right. Just as ExxonMobil is never going to be a green company, the Republican Party is not going to embrace multiculturalism and especially since Trump, regard. That's a word we really need to bring back into our society, having regard for others. What Trump calls woke, I call regard. And at RIT, where we have the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, and deaf people who come to RIT for an education make incredibly more money over their lifetime than those who go to other institutions or don't get any advanced education. They put us through 3 days of training about what amounts to regard for others, people who are not like you. And I've been through training sessions like this. This was the best I have ever been to. It was polished, it was thoughtful, it was rounded, and it was deeply informing. And so there's a word I really want to get back in our language. It's regard.
Well, I don't know that 333 days of regard classes would help anyone involved in the Trump campaign or in this this GOP move to, as you've suggested, sort of take elections as opposed to win elections. So in our last couple of seconds here, David, I just want to quickly address a couple of things that really have come up, and I think you can dispense with them pretty quickly. One of them is the debate. It struck me as Donald Trump working the refs, as I've said, where he's complaining about ABC, sort of being behind enemy lines, nobody likes me, et cetera, while he's, talking about George Stephanopoulos and David, et cetera. He'll debate, won't he? I mean, I don't think there's any question.
I don't know if he's going to show up or not. I mean, Donald
Donald
is afraid of her, and he should be afraid of her. She spent 18 years as a grade prosecutor in Alameda County, which is Oakland. And she did every kind of case you can imagine, and she learned, and she was held in high regard. I mean, there are plenty of defense lawyers who've come out publicly and other prosecutors who say she was an excellent courtroom prosecutor. And given that she has the strength of character that Donald doesn't have and the ability to not take the bait on anything, I'm not surprised Donald is afraid. I posted some time ago, and I do not mean in any way to be demeaning to Kamala Harris, what I'm about to say. I mean to be demeaning of Donald Trump. But to Donald, she's not a person or a woman. She's a mere girl. Well, Donald's afraid of a girl.
Wow.
And I think that just tells you volumes about who he is. I mean, Donald is used to having women around him who are either subservient to him, dependent on him, or in the few cases where they've somewhat stood up to him, they are women who were able to negotiate very well parts of his personality. Barbara Rez, who worked for him for years, Maggie Haberman at the New York Times, they're among the few women who've been able to stand up to him and get him to respond differently. But this is a real danger to Donald. And I think
danger or not, David, apparently, Kim, are you saying this is breaking news that he has reached an agreement? Is that the?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It looks like
Good.
he is saying that on Truth Social, he posted, looks like a debate is going to happen. He says he's reached an agreement with the Harris campaign related to the September 10th debate in Pennsylvania. On Truth Social today, he said it will be held on ABC News and that the rules will be the same as the debate between he and President Biden. This as the Trump and Harris campaigns have been going back and forth on what the rules for that planned debate would be. But I guess they've struck a deal and off we go.
No.
The key rule there that was in dispute was microphones on or off when it's not your turn. And if he shows up, that'll be very interesting. And I suspect Kamala will wipe the floor with him.
It's interesting, David. It's a media event. It's not really a debate of issues. And I thought I don't know why he would want to change from ABC. They essentially challenged nothing of what he said in the last debate. He was a fire hose of lies. Biden melted down, which of course helped him enormously. So no one was on stage challenging his lies. But ABC, and to be fair to ABC, when you're the moderator of a debate, you're not there to take on the candidate with every falsehood and misrepresentation. So it's an interesting thing. Not really a debate, but it's called a debate. It's a media event. It's really personality driven with some facts attached. I don't know. It's an interesting phenomenon, this debate thing. It's become an event in American politics.
If you do fact checking on the run, even if you're thoroughly prepared because you know the kind of lies Donald is going to tell, I think you lose a lot of people and they get lost in the woods. What I would watch for in this debate is that Kamala Harris will try to get under his skin, to mock him, to make fun of him, because Donald has no capacity to laugh at himself. And anybody who's a parent, if you can't learn to laugh at yourself, I can assure you when your kids are growing up, they're not going to be optimal human beings.
Yeah.
And Donald has no capacity to do this. So when the debate comes, just look for her to poke him in ways that he can't deal with, that make fun of him.
In the last 30 seconds, David Cay Johnston, tell me what you think of the RFK Jr. Tulsi Gabbard phenomenon with the they're really campaigning for Donald Trump now with the promise of positions within his administration.
What a sad, sad case Robert F. Kennedy is. And I don't think Tulsi Gabbard is going to affect hardly anybody in terms of votes. But I mean, here's a man whose siblings have all come out and said, "You have disgraced the memory and honor of our father." This is a guy who confessed that he took a bear he was going to eat in his apartment, in the apartment he uses in New York. He apparently actually lives in California, judges ruled. And he didn't have time to cook it, so he took it over into Central Park and made it look like it had been hit by a car or something. I mean,
exactly.
This is just childish, and I don't know if he's going to help Donald or not. He might on the margin. There are enough people who buy this nonsense about vaccines that maybe it'll help him. But I suspect everybody who's a serious anti-vaxxer is already with Trump, forgetting that he bragged that he was the genius behind getting vaccines developed so quickly.
Yeah, it's an odd place that they find themselves, the anti-vaxxers with Trump. But, there are a lot of political oddities these days. David, so grateful that we can spend some time talking to you here. Again, David can be found across the media ecosphere, and I see you everywhere, and I appreciate you putting us on the dance card. But RIT is your new office, Rochester Institute of Technology.
Wonderful place, it turns out, with a lot of wonderful faculty and students. I'm thoroughly thrilled, and I'll look forward to talking with you next week.
All right, good stuff. David Cay Johnston, everybody. Right on.
Hey, which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
Use Mark Thompson.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Right. Love my David Cay Johnston. Too good. Well, that's big breaking news, isn't it? Really big breaking news that Trump's agreed to it. I mean, again, as I was saying, he was working the refs. I always felt he'll debate. If you've watched this show, I've said it from the very beginning. No matter what he says, he needs this debate. A dead heat, which is what it is something he doesn't really want. He feels, and I know, again, we just finished a conversation with David Cay Johnston during which he was making the point that, Donald Trump may have real problems with Kamala Harris. It's not like debating Joe Biden. But I'll remind you, he debated Hillary Clinton to a draw, you might say. You might even say that he won that debate. I mean, a lot of what he does, meaning the stalking of the stage in the case of Hillary Clinton, to go back to that debate, a lot of the way he conducts himself, a lot of the things he says, you may find offensive, you may find impolitic, but it can be effective, and it can be off-putting in a way that throws off your opponent. I know we talk about Harris and the fact that she's going to try to get under his skin, but similarly, there are things that Trump will do that will perhaps throw Harris off. I'm not sure you can get under her skin because I think she does have sort of a prosecutor's exterior. But that said, all you need to do is kind of win the back and forth, and it is a media event. So, again, what's that?
I think these debates are almost more difficult for women because you have to come off as strong and competent. At the same time, you can't come off as bitchy.
Right.
And how you stand on a stage with Donald Trump when he's dispensing lies like a straw dispenser, right? It's just one after the other, just push the button. Sure. I don't know how you maintain kind of a professional composure and not get, not let America see you get annoyed, get kind of a, a resting bitch look on your face. Like, I think it's going to be hard for her because she has to put forth this image that she wants people to see while at the same time coming at him.
I think that was one of the problems that Hillary Clinton had. Mm-hmm. I think you're so right about the pressure on women. There are so many more considerations when you're a woman, how you'll be perceived. By the way, Barack Obama had that. Because there's so many considerations you have when you're black. Yep. You don't want to be the angry black guy. I mean, there was a real, I know people who served with Barack Obama during his administration, and they spoke of that like he was just so measured in his responses. Now, maybe that's the way he is, but he also has to guard against the perception. And I think similarly, Kamala Harris has to guard against it. And I think Hillary Clinton had to guard against the perception. Same thing. Doesn't want to come off as shrewish, doesn't want to come off as, the angry woman. histrionic woman, all the things that they can say that are, that are really sexist put downs. So
not the same for Trump. He can be as wild and mean and crazy as he wants to be, and he doesn't get judged for that type of perception. That's just him. That's the way he is.
Cheryl has an interesting strategy. I hope she toys, maybe she tries to get under his skin. Mm-hmm. She needs to look at all the black newscasters when they attacked him. Yeah, they attacked him with facts. Cheryl is actually right about this. When he spoke before that conference, first question out of the chute was straight up facts, and it steamrolled him. So it's an interesting notion that might be the way he...
Point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we'll have to see. Again, a lot of those things would be moderator dependent as well. Kelly Malloy with a 5 spot. I want to thank you, Kelly, for always being there.
Big shout out.
Big shout out. And Wes Theory with a $5 super sticker. Thank you. Big shout out there as well. And Tony says Kamala wants let me just see if I can see it. Kamala wants the mics on so that she can put Trump in his place when he interrupts her saying, I'm speaking. She did the same thing with Pence. So that's interesting. So it's part of that strategy. We'll see how that works out. And North Side Service Company. I have great regard for David Cay Johnston and Mark Thompson because he was talking about having regard for people. Very well done, North Side Service Company. Whenever I'm on the North Side and I need service, you know who I go to? North Side Service Company, of course. Yes. Very cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Just because we're talking about RFK Jr., I have a story for you that
The Mark Thompson Show.
Just because we were talking about RFK Jr., and now there are questions about whether RFK Jr. can get on to the agenda of getting himself off of ballots in time to allow his voters to vote for Trump. There are increasing indications that he may not be able to do that in all the various states on which he exists as a candidate. He worked so hard to get on those ballots. Now he's trying to get off those ballots to open them up to his new daddy, who is Donald Trump. But meanwhile, in the RFK Jr. family, RFK Jr.'s daughter, Kik Kennedy, is kind of hanging out with Ben Affleck, everybody. Yeah. Kik has been spotted with Ben hanging out at the Polo Lounge in Beverly Hills.
That's fancy.
It is. He's 52, Ben Affleck. And how old is Kik Kennedy, you may ask? I mean, if he's 52, how old is she? Maybe 50, 48, 45, something age appropriate. She's 36.
All right.
36 and 52. I fully approve this union. Yes, fully approve it. In fact, too close in age for my taste. Seems to have chosen to keep her name out of politics, Kik Kennedy did. She is pursuing a career as an actress. There she is, Kik on the right, Ben on the left, for those who need help. She's appeared in an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm. She played customer number 2. I love that role. She was so much better than customer number 1 in that episode. Her stepmother, Cheryl Hines, of course, is in Curb Your Enthusiasm, so helped her along. Her name is Kathleen Alexandra, but I kind of like the nickname Kik.
Yeah, Kik is cool. It was her aunt's nickname as well, so she's kind of takes after her aunt.
Oh, that's very cool. Good knowledge from Kim. One of 2 children from RFK Jr.'s first marriage to Emily Black, and she's named after her great aunt, as Kim was noting.
Did you read the story that she's had about the whale?
Oh, I guess that's her great aunt. Yes, the story about the whale is disturbing in the extreme. Would you like to share some of it, Kim? I feel we haven't heard a lot from you today.
So we heard about the bear in Central Park, right?
Yeah, he hit a bear with his car, and then he strapped it to the top of the car, drove it to, or put it in the car, I forget which, took it to Central Park, and tried to make it look like... put it in Central Park because he wanted it to look like
roadkill in the park or something.
I see, roadkill in the park. Yeah. So that was his bear story. There were a couple
of tales. He didn't have time to take it home. Apparently, he was going to eat it. who eats a bear that you find on the road, but he was going to.
Sure.
And now we find out from his daughter Kik that he has an obsession with animal skeletons. Odd, but okay. So he finds out that there's a whale that has washed up on a beach in, I think it's Hyannisport. So he puts a family in the minivan and drives them to the beach. And this, according to his daughter, chops off the head of the whale with a chainsaw, an electric saw, straps the skull of the whale to the top of the vehicle, and off they go down the road with whale juice flying down the windshield and in the windows. And I guess everyone has to wear plastic over their heads so they don't get the whale juice on them.
Yeah, apparently, literally every time he stopped the car or turned it one way or the other, the whale juice was leaking in through the windows, and it was just this rank odor she talked about. Pretty incredible.
Then today, there is word that RFK Jr., the day after he, comes out in support of Trump, is now talking about and spewing forth conspiracy theories over chemtrails on the internet. So you have to wonder if he's dealing with the full deck.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a conspiracy guy. And as I always tell you, just because there are a lot of conspiracy theories about something doesn't mean it's not really a conspiracy. In other words, I will take a meeting on any conspiracy. I love listening to conspiracy theories. Some of them can be outrageous. Some of them can make sense. Listen, I'll give you one of the moment. Again, just to step back from RFK Jr., obviously those are some of them are pretty outlandish. And I also hated the fact that Donald Trump, during his administration, was having all the conspiracy theorists, the Alex Joneses, the ones who are just concocting stuff because it was commerce, it was business, it was a way to make money. He was having them all as guests at the White House. I mean, people forget how the smear on U.S. history that Donald Trump's administration was, just from the standpoint of visitors at the White House. But be that as it may, I'll give you a conspiracy theory of this hour that is now getting some momentum, and that is associated with that super yacht downing. The increasing evidence is challenging this basic narrative that this super yacht was sunk as a result of that weather incident. There is simply, as we've heard, the boat builder and those who know the maritime tolerances of boats like this say there's really no way that boat could be capsized as a result of some weather like this. It just wouldn't happen. And so increasingly, they're looking at other things. For example, they're looking not as to what the accident was, but this coexists with the accident. The holdings, the assets of the guy who was killed, those assets were held by who? Not the guy. The wife, the surviving wife. So again, I'm not saying I buy the conspiracy. I'm just saying I'm intrigued by the conspiracy. There are things here that are inexplicable, that are unexplainable. And so with that said, I'm always willing to take a meeting about these various things, even though obviously at the end of it all, one may not actually buy the conspiracy going forward. But yes, RFK Jr. is, it seems like he's the last stop on the conspiracy train. That's where the train goes, all of you who are into conspiracies. So, it's crazy. I look at him and I look at Tulsi Gabbard. I mentioned my comments about Tulsi Gabbard at the beginning of the show, so I won't review them for you again now. But if you're curious, you can go back and hear them. I do kind of, in a way, disagree with David Cay Johnston. I think Tulsi Gabbard is a really good surrogate for Donald Trump. So I actually see her as a credible stump speaker, and meaning if you get her out on the stump speaking, I think she delivers the goods. She sounds credible, and as I mentioned, she's got credible military service. So I don't know what kind of difference she'll make. I'm just suggesting she is a decent surrogate. These races are a dead heat. In fact, I'd like to make one point about the polling, because
The Mark Thompson Show.
The polling really has a lot of these races state to state, and these are the key swing state races, as a dead heat. And the reason that concerns me, obviously I don't want Trump to win. My bias is up front. I try to call the balls and strikes as objectively as I can, but I really do not want Trump anywhere near the White House. But that said, I have to look objectively at the situation with the latest polling and remind you that the polling associated with the 2016 election, in which Trump beat Hillary Clinton, actually underreported Donald Trump's favorability and underreported Donald Trump's lead by 3.6 percentage points. If you go to 2020, the election that he lost to Joe Biden, again, Trump's voters were undercounted in various polling by just over 2%. So that when you look at a dead heat, I see that Trump is actually still a little bit ahead of Kamala Harris in many of these swing states. Again, maybe that's me being a pessimist. The glass is half full. She has pulled even. She's pulled even to where Biden was before the meltdown debate that he had. But I'd suggest it's still a very even game. Obviously, she has momentum, but from a polling standpoint, I just would say don't get too happy, Democrats. It's still very early. A lot can happen. And this debate will be very, very important. So smash the like button like a boss if you haven't.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
Do it with your iron rod. Scott Rittenberg, thanks for the archive. I'm in red country, and I'll catch up now. Yes, nice. Scott is a great...
big shout out.
Big shout out to Scott Rittenberg, a big supporter of the show. And I believe Scott's going to be with us for the meetup, which happens Thursday night. Yeah, that's very cool. Mm-hmm. Looking forward to that. And Judy says, I don't understand why the Harris campaign wants open mics at the debate. I'm very much in favor of the muted mics. It compels some degree of decorum. I don't, and by the way, hang on a second. You've heard this all show, Tony? You hear the echo, right? You hear me and the headphones? Is that from Kim, or what is that?
Yes. Yeah, if I take Kim out, if I take Kim out right now, watch, and talk now.
Yeah, so you don't hear it. So why haven't you said anything through this entire show, pal?
Because that's been every day. That's always there.
Well, I mean...
Thanks, Tony. Echo.
Always been there. It's because
you just hear
we're
faint
radio
echo.
And we're deaf, and the microphone's picking up the headphones.
Okay,
we're all deaf in radio.
Okay, all right, but it helps me if we can have some degree of quality control on that.
Is there still an echo if I sit away from the mic? Oh wow.
Well, no, but that changes the. You have to hug the mic. I see that. I'm just suggesting maybe you turn the headphones down a little bit. That's all. You go one on, one off. That'll work. Anyway, okay, Tony doesn't like it. Tony. He wants to live with the echo. Okay, good.
It's been
anyway,
like a year.
No, I don't hear it every day. I really don't. Maybe that's because I don't hear it. Decorum is a ding word, says Tom. Okay, I buy that. What was I saying? It was something important, and I can't remember what it was now.
You were responding to Judy, who said she thinks the mic cutoff switch would have some decorum there at the debate.
See, Kim's thing sounds fine now. No, I don't hear myself. Good. Well, no, it sounds fine. Judy is right that's sort of an imposed decorum, right? Because your mic isn't going to be heard. What the natural back and forth should be shouldn't require you to mute the mics. Clearly, it would seem what the Harris people want. And by the way, this is all being handled by the Harris people. Okay, I mean, Kamala Harris isn't sitting there necessarily. I'm not suggesting she knows nothing about this. I'm sure they've discussed it with her. But these negotiations are happening on the Trump side and they're happening on the Harris side, pretty much being handled by her people. And so they are essentially saying, hey, we're okay with the mics open. We don't need a proctor for this exam. We don't need any kind of rule imposed. Our candidate can handle it with an open mic, and your candidate should be able to handle it with an open mic as well. And then, of course, this is the strategy up their sleeve, I'd suggest. When he runs afoul of that, it's going to look bad. It'll look bad if he's talking over her, she's trying to make a point, and he speaks over her. It'll look bad. It'll look like that debate that Chris Wallace was the moderator for, where he was all over Biden. Remember, that was actually...
Can you let him finish, sir?
Yeah, that was a strategy that Chris Christie gave Donald Trump, that Biden's a stutterer, Biden will lose it if you try to... interrupt him a little bit, get all over him, jump on him. That is the way to win that debate. That was a Chris Christie strategy.
Can you let him finish, sir?
And I'd suggest it didn't make, first of all, Biden didn't cave under that. And number two, it made Trump, I think, look bad. And by the way, he lost that election.
Can you let him finish, sir?
Trump's handlers want muted mics because they don't think he can be presidential for 90 minutes, says Harry. Well, I mean, that may be.
Big shout out.
I don't know. As I say, look, I understand she's tough, and I understand she's not Joe Biden. But I thought his first outing on ABC, in which he kind of said what he wanted, and they, the debate format is such that you can say what you want, and unless the other person on stage is calling out your lies and fact-checking you in real time, David and I just spoke about this, David Cay Johnston, there is really no check on that kind of strategy. So he can just go at it like a Gatling gun with one lie after another, one misrepresentation after another. And Kamala Harris has to decide, do I want to really call this guy out on all of this stuff? I mean, it really is so difficult. Or do I want to get my agenda, my talking points out, and maybe call him out on a thing or two? So I think she's facing a real fork in the road there. But as I say, there's nothing in the debate format at ABC, I don't care who's moderating the debate, that would suggest he's going to have a rough time just because he's on ABC. That is him working the refs. They handled him with kid gloves, or is it kid gloves, the last time. So give the fact checker a whip. Yeah, where's my whip? Yeah. Every time there's a, yeah. I thought the comment that I've seen so far that really did remind me that moderators can do a lot was the comment that related to him before the Black Journalist Convention. Because that Black Journalist Convention really was informed by one moment. Am I right? It was the moment at which the first question comes out, and it so assaults Trump's record that he becomes angry. He talks about how I had to wait to get on here today. I can't believe you would treat me this way. He really devolved into sort of complaints. And I thought that was a really effective way to get him back on his heels. Not to say that that was the effort that they were trying to make, although maybe it was, but they were hitting him with facts right away. And to the extent that you get those kinds of questions from moderators, then it could actually make a difference. That is to say, the environment. But the last thing I would say about this debate thing is something that keeps coming up in certain circles. It's about Elon Musk. Elon Musk spoke to Donald Trump for 2 hours on the X platform. It was in one of those Twitter Spaces things. And I believe that was the platform. And he talked to Trump for, again, a long period of time. And I've heard from people like, that's what Kamala Harris needs to do. She needs to sit down and have an interview and talk for a long period of time. Well, if you're using that as your North Star on this question, Elon Musk did everything but give Donald Trump a back rub during that conversation. It was embarrassing. He opens with how much a fan of Donald Trump he is, how he's supporting him with his money, with his various social media platforms. And he even said, I think this is a direct quote, I think you're best for the future of America. This is the way the guy who is the moderator of this conversation is opening his conversation with Trump. It's absurd. You want Kamala Harris to sit through 2 hours with someone who opens it like that? Great. I mean, why doesn't she have her sister interview her? It was so embarrassing. The idea somehow that you could hold out that Elon Musk conversation with Donald Trump as anything more than what it was, which was a campaign rally type back and forth, is absurd.
Not that I'm a fan of Elon Musk at all, but I have to say he's not a journalist. You know, he's not a journalist. He's not from a reputable network. And we know he's a fan of Trump. So what did we just expect going into it, except for this is going to be a pep rally? That's all.
Well, I'm telling you that people look at it afterward, and I'm hearing this from many people. Like, you see, Donald Trump wasn't afraid to sit down and talk for 2 hours in an open format where people are asking him, please. I mean, it was just not that. It wasn't, sure. It would be like, going home and not being afraid to talk over Thanksgiving dinner for 2 hours. I mean, it was a crazy, friendly environment.
Right.
Absolutely insane. So that's all it did not count as an interview. Thank you, Becky. But that said, it's still being pointed to as something. I'm really, as you know, in the camp that suggests that I don't see a reason to sit down with the Lester Holtz, the David Muirs. I don't see it. I don't. Why? So you want to sit down and do a gotcha interview with one of those people? Right now, I don't see it. Now, you could do a friendlier interview. I don't know. There may be people in the mainstream media, Gayle King, or people who are likely just not going to be going for the gotcha moment that you could sit down and do an interview with. But the people, I've said it before, who want you to sit down for an interview are the people who are in the business of doing sit-down interviews, the media. And what's happened is, because the media does dictate messages, is that everybody's now saying, well, I want her to sit down for a sit-down interview. Why? Because they're getting that from the media, the backbeat of, she still hasn't done a sit-down interview. She still hasn't done a sit-down interview. I mean, like the sit-down interview is the holy grail of American politics. So at some point, you won't be able to push back on that. At some point, you'll have to, I think you'll have to do it. But I also, and I also think that she could do it, But that said, I don't think there's any hurry.
She said that she would do it by the end of the month.
Sure, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I get it. But I would, I would also say that campaign schedules change, and I'll do it after the debate. It's a 10-day wait.
So
I know that's the camp I'm in. So
she's as far as her relationship with the media, I've noticed that she's coming down the plane steps and trying to talk to the journalists that are waiting at the bottom of the steps. But for the most part, just as someone who was a reporter when she was working as DA or Attorney General, you would call her office to get comment, and she would be very difficult to get a comment from unless she had something she wanted to say to you. When she wanted to talk about her work regarding trafficking victims, she came to KGO and sat down with a talk show host for an hour. But when you would call her for comment on a case, she didn't have anything to say to you and would never return the call.
I see that as completely consistent with most politicians. Yeah. If I don't want to talk about something, I don't talk to the media. Why? Because you called, I'm supposed to pick up?
Call Gavin Newsom when he's mayor of San Francisco. You get a call right back with comment, no matter what it is.
Okay.
Call Kamala Harris, you're not getting a call back.
But you're calling her about a controversial court case in which she was the prosecutor.
Sure,
it's a lot different. Yeah.
I don't know.
Usually, the prosecutor's office puts out a statement about any kind of court cases.
Other
I don't mean to
DAs,
defend.
It was easier. I'm not saying it's right
or wrong.
I'm
arguing a case, a situation where I don't know what the case was or whatever.
As a member of the media, I found it difficult to get a hold of her, whereas other politicians and people in office were easier to reach. That's not to say that she doesn't want to sit down with the media. It's just to say that she has a track record, in my book, of when she wants to talk, she'll talk.
That's fair. I mean, that's a fair way to evaluate her. And again, I expect a member of the media to offer an evaluation of a candidate that's associated with how they handle the media, because that's what media people do. And what I'm saying is that that's not really necessarily germane when it comes to how you're doing with the public. The public, they don't care whether you've called Kim McAllister back.
No.
They're actually looking at other issues that affect their lives. But Kim's in the business, to be fair to Kim, of trying to get politicians and those who are policymakers on the record. So I don't blame Kim for evaluating those who are more available than others. So please don't misunderstand me. But and I think many agree with you here. Transparency is what people like. Yeah, to a point. Again, there are reasons to talk to the media, and and the last thing I'll say on this, and then we'll move on, is that There are reasons to talk to the media, there are reasons to do interviews, and there are reasons not to. And the reason to do the media sit down is if you have something you want to say and make sure it gets out there, that's the reason to call Kim McAllister back or to do the media sit down. The other reason to do it is because the call for it has become so loud that you really can't avoid it any further. So that may be the reason that she ultimately does the sit down. The reason not to do it is what I've just noted. The public doesn't care. They absolutely don't. Look at her rallies. Look at the momentum of her campaign. She doesn't need to do a sit-down interview. But, by the way, that doesn't mean ad infinitum she doesn't need to do it. Some point she's going to need to do it, and I'm suggesting you put it off until after the debate. There's almost no percentage in doing it between now and the debate. That would be, I would say, a misstep. Why would you possibly do a sit-down interview if you're Kamala Harris between now and the debate? The debate is going to reset this entire thing. The debate is key. Even though it's not a debate, it's a TV show, it's a media event, it will reset this campaign, potentially. It's incredibly significant. Why would you do something else significant between now and then? You have no upside in doing it. I would consider it malpractice for her to do a sit-down interview between now and the debate. So that's where I sit on it. Anyway.
Well, what if it's a way to keep the momentum going? What if it's a way to, keep your name in the public eye, keep yourself out there? We've seen. I'm not that her name isn't going to be in the public eye.
No one's mentioning Kamala Harris for hours.
No, you know what I mean. Right. I mean, remember when Bill Clinton played the saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show?
Yeah, but that's not a sit-down interview. There are plenty of media events.
Sit-down interviews, appearances on talk shows, all of these things keep you, hot. You get the hot
appearance.
ticket.
Again, this is what happens. Appearances on talk shows and media events are different than sit-down gotcha interviews that you're going to do with Lester Holt or David Muir. And again, I don't think she's going to have any problem with this stuff. I don't. I think she'll be fine with those gotcha interviews. What I'm suggesting is between now and debate, she doesn't gain anything by doing them. She's already in the public eye. She already has momentum. How much longer between now and the debate? How many days is it? I mean, is
September 10th. So what is it, August 27th?
Yeah. So, I mean, really? You want to do a sit-down between now and then? I mean, what is it, a couple of weeks? Mm-hmm. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Yeah, she should do Dancing with the Stars, Becky says, to keep her in. Yeah, she's just not relevant enough is the problem with Kamala Harris. She's got to sit down with that mainstream media. That's the only way to get those clicks and the views. Yeah, I think it's ludicrous. I think you wait till after the debate and then you sit down with the person of your choice. And I don't know. I think it should be somebody from the political ecosphere. Like, I don't think she should sit down with Oprah Winfrey. I don't think she should sit down with, I don't even think she should sit down with Gayle King. I think she should get a Lester Holt, David Muir, George Stephanopoulos, or whatever. That's where I would be. Or, Martha Raddatz, or, one of those people off the ABC roster who would be, I think, tough with her and who's very well informed as a journalist. Margaret Brennan or any of these others who are there. All right, so I'm trying to see if this is the kind of comment I want to finish with. Great show as usual. Thank you. I appreciate it. Big shout out to Dan. I think Dan is also going to be in our meetup. Yeah, I love it. Someone from NPR Radio, Peter is saying, should do this interview. Christian Amanpour. Oh, that's an interesting idea. Jiminy Glick should do the interview, says Dragons Marine. Sure, Jiminy Glick. Yeah. She needs an uncut interview, though, says Josh. Well, that's very hard to come by now. I feel like 60 Minutes might be a good place for her to land or whatever. I don't know. But again, B.A. Ware agrees. Christian Amanpour would be great. So we'll find out soon enough. But again, I think the timetable should be after the debate. So
The Mark Thompson Show.
Tony, you have anything that I need to attend to, sir?
No, we good.
Meet the press is what she should do, says Sandy. I suggested 60 Minutes also, says Wes. There you go. Well, What can I say? We've done a lot. The great Mark Thompson interview. Thank you. Yeah, I can't wait to get that underway. Okay. Look, all I'm asking is that she return Kim's call once to get her to do this shit. Yeah, let's please get that.
This is Mark Thompson.
Right, exactly. That's what you'll get. Yes, we're calling from Mark Thompson's podcast. I'm wondering if Ms. Harris would like to do
This is Mark Thompson.
Yes, well, he's a farmer. He's got quite an impressive body of work. Did you see When Animals Attack 5? He was the voice.
This is Mark Thompson.
All right. All right, everyone. The After Party Live is next. Thanks for supporting our show and being so cool. Everybody's the greatest, and we appreciate you coming through.
I'm Shadow Stevens for The Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Go see Kim at the After Party.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
Until tomorrow. Bye-bye.